Arise, O Zion, your light has come. The Sabbath Kingdom has begun. The scattered return. The land comes alive under the presence. Creation will rise. Arise, O Zion, put on your strength. The order of peace will cover.
Shalom everyone, welcome back. Today we continue this journey together as we explore the next part of our investigation into the Sabbath reign of the kingdom. In this study, we will examine several prophetic patterns, connections, and sequences found throughout the scriptures that build upon what we discovered in our first teaching. As we place these passages side by side, they begin to reveal a remarkable picture of the Sabbath, the kingdom, restoration, and the everlasting purpose of Adonai. So let us continue our journey through the scriptures and see where these patterns lead us. The prophetic promise of the Sabbath. From the beginning, the Sabbath carried a promise greater than the weekly cessation of labor. When Adonai completed the work of creation, he blessed the seventh day and sanctified it. The 6 days were marked by labor, formation, and ordering. The seventh was distinguished as the day in which the work reached its appointed rest. The Sabbath therefore entered Scripture not merely as a commandment for humanity, but as a pattern established within creation itself. 6 days are followed by the seventh. Labor is followed by rest. Disorder is brought into order. The work advances until it reaches the purpose established by the Almighty. This pattern later became the foundation for an ancient expectation. Just as creation unfolded through 6 days and entered the Sabbath on the seventh, the history of the world would also move toward a great Sabbath and appointed age in which Adonai would bring his creation beneath his righteous government. The weekly Sabbath continually reminded Israel that the present condition of the world was not permanent. Humanity still labored beneath the consequences of rebellion. The ground bore the effects of the curse. Kingdoms rose and fell. Nations oppressed one another, and the divine order revealed at creation remained obscured beneath human violence and corruption. Yet every seventh day declared that labor would not continue forever. The Almighty had established a boundary for the work of restoration, and history was moving toward an appointed rest. This is why the prophets could speak of a coming age in which the rule of Adonai would become visible upon the earth, the nations would receive instruction, the wounded creation would begin to recover, and righteous order would replace the dominion of rebellion. The Sabbath was the pattern. The kingdom was the promise contained within it. Ancient Jewish teachers also recognized this relationship between the 7 days of creation and the larger course of history. Some spoke of 6,000 years corresponding to the 6 days, followed by a 7th millennium associated with the Sabbath of Adonai. Their descriptions were not always identical, yet they preserved the ancient conviction that the seventh day pointed beyond itself to a greater Sabbath in the Almighty's purpose. This expectation did not arise because an ordinary day was simply enlarged into 1,000 years. It arose because the pattern of creation revealed how Adonai works. He begins, he orders. He separates, he fills, he brings his work toward completion. Then creation enters the rest established by his presence and government. The Sabbath rest of the kingdom must therefore be understood as the restoration of divine order, not as an age of inactivity. The land is healed because the curse has wounded it. The nations are instructed because human government has led them away from Adonai's ways. Justice is established because oppression has distorted the purpose of authority. The kingdom brings rest because rebellion is being brought beneath righteous rule. This is the meaning of Sabbath peace. A household rests when everything within it has been brought into harmony. A land rests when violence no longer devours its inhabitants. The nations rest when they cease learning war and begin walking in the instruction of Adonai. Creation rests when the government of the Almighty is no longer resisted as it was before. For this reason, the coming kingdom may rightly be understood as a Sabbath reign. It fulfills upon the earth what the weekly Sabbath announced in advance. Adonai would not abandon his creation to perpetual corruption or permit the governments of rebellious humanity to continue without end. Human kingdoms would not possess the earth forever. Violence would not speak the final word. The curse would not remain without remedy. Adonai would restore his government, establish righteous dominion, and lead creation toward the purpose for which it had been formed. Yet this prophetic Sabbath must not be confused with the final eternal state. The Sabbath age is the appointed reign in which restoration advances throughout the earth. The everlasting kingdom appears only when that work has reached its full and irreversible completion. The seventh-day pattern therefore points toward the great Sabbath of history while preparing us to understand why the 1,000 years are an age of restoration rather than the final eternity. From the beginning, the Sabbath testified that the Almighty would bring the long work of history beneath his righteous order, restore what rebellion had damaged, and establish his kingdom upon the earth. It is within this ancient Sabbath expectation that we must now examine the 1,000 years. 2. The 1,000 years, the age of restoration and testing. Having seen that the Sabbath points beyond the weekly day of rest, we now turn to the great Sabbath of history revealed through the 1,000 years. The millennium should not be treated as an isolated prophecy appearing for the first time in Revelation. The pattern begins in creation, continues through Torah, and is expanded by the prophets. Revelation then reveals its appointed place within the prophetic timeline. The prophets describe an order unlike the world we know today. The nations seek the instruction of Adonai. Justice confronts oppression. The land begins to flourish. The scattered are gathered. What rebellion wounded is brought beneath healing and righteous government. This is more than a change of political leadership. The millennial kingdom does not merely replace one human empire with another, it restores creation beneath the order established by the Almighty. The prophetic writings often place judgment, gathering, restoration, peace, and final glory within one field of vision without separating every stage through which those promises unfold. For this reason, we must not force every prophetic promise into one moment. Revelation gives us the sequence more clearly. The 1,000 years come first. During this appointed reign, darkness is restrained from deceiving the nations as it did before. The kingdom governs, the nations are instructed, the land is healed, and restoration advances throughout the earth. Yet the millennium is not the final eternal order. At the conclusion of the 1,000 years, darkness is released for a final period of testing. This release reveals that evil has been restrained but not yet permanently destroyed. A last rebellion follows, exposing what remains within those who have lived beneath righteous government. Only after that final rebellion comes irreversible judgment. Death and Hades are destroyed. The former order passes away. Then Yochanan beholds the new heaven, the new earth, and new Jerusalem descending from above. The sequence is meaningful. The millennium is restoration in progress. The everlasting kingdom is restoration completed and made irreversible. During the 1,000 years, the kingdom is active. The nations are taught, righteous judgment is established, inheritance is restored, and creation is brought back beneath divine order. These activities are not signs that the promise remains unfulfilled. They are the works through which Adonai carries his promise toward completion. The significance of the 1,000 years, therefore, lies not merely in their duration, but in their purpose. They form the appointed age of restoration, transition, righteous government, and testing. Creation is healed beneath divine rule, while every remaining allegiance is eventually brought into the light before the final judgment. The Sabbath announced that creation would not remain forever beneath rebellion. The millennium reveals the restorative reign through which that promise begins to take visible form upon the earth. Yet restoration cannot endure without rightful dominion. The prophets repeatedly connect the healing of creation with the restoration of the kingdom itself. To understand that relationship, we must now turn to the Restored Malkhut. Let's talk about the Restored Malkhut. The restoration of creation cannot be separated from the restoration of righteous government. The land may be healed, the nations instructed, and the inheritance returned, but none of these blessings can endure while rebellion continues to define the order of the world. Restoration, therefore, requires more than repair. It requires the return of rightful dominion. This is where the scriptural language of Malkhut becomes essential. Malkhut means kingdom, kingship, sovereignty, or royal dominion. It speaks not merely of territory, but of authority made present and effective. A kingdom exists where the will of the ruler is established, righteous judgment is administered, and the order of that government becomes visible among those who live beneath it. The restored Malkhut is therefore the government of Adonai becoming manifest within creation. This does not mean that Adonai ever ceased to be king. His authority was never lost, and his throne was never overthrown. What was lost below was the willing alignment of the earthly order with his government above. Humanity rejected divine instruction. Kings established dominion through violence. Nations claimed the earth as their possession. The inheritance was divided, corrupted, and placed beneath governments that did not reflect the righteousness of Adonai. The restoration of Malkhut answers that rebellion by returning creation beneath the order of the rightful king. Yet the prophets reveal something remarkable. This restored dominion does not remain only an invisible heavenly reality. It comes toward an appointed recipient within the prophetic earth. Micah declares, "And thou, O tower of the flock, the stronghold of the daughter of Zion, unto thee shall it come, even the former dominion, the kingdom shall come to the daughter of Jerusalem." The direction of the prophecy is unmistakable. The dominion comes to her. The kingdom comes to the daughter of Jerusalem. This language moves beyond the general announcement that Adonai will reign. It identifies the daughter of Zion as the one toward whom the former dominion returns. She is not merely a spectator watching the establishment of the kingdom, nor does she stand outside the royal order. The prophecy places her within its reception. The phrase former dominion also carries great weight. Micah is not describing an authority invented for the first time at the end of history. The language points backward to a dominion belonging to the original order obscured through rebellion, yet preserved within the purpose of Adonai until the appointed restoration. The Malkhut is restored because it belongs to the design established from the beginning. This allows us to see Eden from another perspective. Eden was not only a garden, it was the first earthly manifestation of divine order, heaven and earth in harmony, the presence of Adonai among creation, life flowing from the appointed center, and humanity entrusted with a sacred inheritance beneath divine government. When rebellion entered, that order was fractured. The presence was concealed. The ground came beneath the curse. The inheritance was lost. Human dominion became separated from the righteousness of heaven. The restoration of Malkhut therefore restores the proper relationship between divine government, sacred presence, creation, and inheritance. Micah does not, however, present the daughter independently from the king. The kingdom comes to her, yet its authority originates in Adonai. She receives the dominion, but she does not create it from herself. The order proceeds from heaven and becomes manifest below through the one appointed to receive it. This distinction is essential because Scripture does not present the restored kingdom as another human government established by the strength of imperfect rulers. The history of earthly kingdoms has already demonstrated the weakness of that order. Kings fail, priests turn aside, judges become corrupt, nations seek their own glory. Even those entrusted with sacred responsibility remain unable to complete the work of restoring creation. The final kingdom cannot depend upon the same order that repeatedly failed. Its source must be divine, its authority must come from above, and its government must be entrusted to those capable of carrying the purpose of Adonai toward completion. The restored Malkhut is therefore not the triumph of one human political system over another. It is the reappearance of divine royal order within the earth. Micah's language also prevents us from reducing Zion to geography alone. The daughter is addressed personally. She receives, she travails, she goes forth, she is gathered, she rises, she threshes. She is not merely a piece of land spoken of poetically. The prophetic language presents a living feminine identity through whom Zion's destiny becomes visible. This does not erase the people, the land, or the historical city. Rather, it gathers them into the deeper identity of the daughter who carries the kingdom, the inheritance, and the household within her prophetic calling. The restored Malkhut, therefore, has both royal and maternal dimensions. It governs, yet it also gathers. It establishes order while carrying the wounded. It receives dominion, yet that dominion is directed toward restoration rather than self-exaltation. This becomes especially clear when Micah continues beyond the announcement of the former dominion. The same prophetic field includes the gathering of the lame, the assembling of the outcast, the rescue of the afflicted, and the reign of Adonai over them. The kingdom is not restored merely to display power. It is restored to recover what has been scattered. Its authority serves healing. Its government protects the inheritance. Its order creates the conditions in which the wounded household may be gathered and restored. For this reason, the restored Malkhut cannot be separated from the Sabbath age. The Sabbath announces the promise of divine order, while Malkhut gives that promise visible governmental form within the earth. Yet the restored government does not remain enclosed within Zion. Once the dominion comes to the daughter, something begins to proceed from her toward the nations. The prophets do not merely say that Zion receives instruction. They declare that Torah goes forth from Zion. That movement reveals the next dimension of the restored kingdom, divine instruction becoming the living order by which the nations are taught to walk in the ways of Adonai. Healing the land and the nations. When Torah proceeds from Zion, the kingdom begins to reshape the world beyond her borders. The prophets do not describe divine instruction as a private possession confined to one people. They reveal the nations coming willingly to receive it. Come, and let us go up to the mountain of Adonai, to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths, for the Torah shall go forth from Zion, and the word of Adonai from Jerusalem. This is one of the clearest descriptions of restoration in action. The nations have lived beneath governments formed by ambition, violence, fear, and the desire for dominion. Their ways have been shaped by rulers who exalt themselves, economies that consume the weak, and systems that preserve power through conflict. Yet the prophetic vision does not end with the destruction of the nations. They are invited to learn another way. They come to Zion because the order proceeding from her is unlike the order they have known. Torah teaches them how to live beneath the government of Adonai, judge righteously, honor life, and inhabit the earth without devouring one another. The healing of the nations, therefore, begins with instruction. Peace does not arise merely because weapons are removed. Weapons are removed because the desires, judgments, and systems that produce them are being confronted. The nations cease learning war because they begin learning the ways of Adonai. Only then can the instruments of violence be transformed into instruments that cultivate life. The prophet declares, "And he shall judge among the nations and shall rebuke many people, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks." The transformation is deliberate. The same strength once used to destroy the land is redirected toward tending it. The sword becomes a plowshare. The spear becomes a pruning hook. Human labor no longer serves conquest, but cultivation. This reveals that the healing of the nations and the healing of the land are inseparable. War does not wound humanity alone. It scars the earth, destroys harvests, displaces households, contaminates water, and turns inheritance into desolation. As the nations are brought beneath righteous order, the land begins to recover from the violence committed upon it. The prophets therefore speak of ruined places being rebuilt, deserted lands becoming fruitful, and regions once considered barren producing life again. Isaiah declares that the wilderness and the solitary place shall be glad, and that the desert shall blossom. Ezekiel speaks of land once desolate becoming like the Garden of Eden. Amos describes the plowman overtaking the reaper and the mountains dropping sweet wine. These images are not isolated ornaments of prophetic poetry. Together they reveal the consequences of righteous government. When oppression is restrained, the land can breathe. When inheritance is protected, households can cultivate what belongs to them. When warfare no longer consumes generation after generation, vineyards can be planted and their fruit enjoyed. When divine order reaches the earth, creation begins to answer. This healing should not, however, be mistaken for the instantaneous removal of every trace of the former world. The prophets speak of rebuilding because devastation has occurred, gathering because scattering has taken place, healing because wounds remain, and instruction because the nations still have much to learn. The language of restoration itself reveals a kingdom actively bringing creation out of disorder. The king judges among the nations. Torah teaches them how to walk. The scattered are gathered, the devastated inheritance is repaired, the land is cultivated again. The kingdom does not merely announce that the world has changed, it carries out the work through which that change becomes visible. The healing of the nations also reveals the mercy within divine government. Adonai does not only overthrow corrupt dominion, he teaches those who have lived beneath it. The nations are not healed by remaining as they were, nor by adopting another form of human pride. They are restored by coming beneath instruction that originates in the righteous order of heaven. This is the difference between imperial rule and divine Malkhut. Earthly empires compel conquered peoples to serve the glory of the ruler. The kingdom of Adonai brings the nations beneath an order that restores life. Its justice corrects, its instruction forms, its authority protects, its peace produces fruit. The nations are not merely subdued from without, they are taught to walk in a different path. Micah adds another beautiful dimension to this vision. But they shall sit every man under his vine and under his fig tree, and none shall make them afraid. Here peace becomes personal. The prophetic promise enters the household. Each person sits beneath the fruit of the land without fear that an army, ruler, or oppressor will take it away. The vine and the fig tree represent more than agricultural abundance. They reveal secure inheritance. The land yields fruit, the household enjoys it, the government protects it. Fear no longer governs ordinary life as it did before. This is Sabbath peace becoming tangible within creation. Yet this great healing still belongs to the restorative work of the kingdom. The nations are learning, the land is recovering, the inheritance is being secured, and righteous government is bringing creation toward wholeness. Because this order proceeds from Zion, the prophetic vision now leads us more deeply into her identity. The ancient Sabbath was not only remembered as a holy day, it came to be welcomed through royal feminine imagery as a queen entering her appointed place. To understand why, we must now turn to the mystery of the Sabbath Queen. Let's talk about the Sabbath Queen. The royal feminine imagery of the Sabbath did not arise by accident. Once the Sabbath is understood as the sign of divine order, sacred presence, rest in the coming kingdom, the image of a queen becomes deeply fitting. The Sabbath is not welcomed merely as another passing day. She is received as one entering with dignity, holiness, and royal authority. Ancient Jewish tradition often spoke of welcoming the Sabbath as a bride and a queen. These images preserve an important recognition. The Sabbath was perceived not merely as an abstract commandment, but as a living royal reality entering the household and bringing it beneath another order. The working week belonged to labor, struggle, commerce, production, and the burdens of the present world. Then the Sabbath entered. Ordinary labor ceased. The household prepared itself. Lamps were kindled, the table was arranged, garments were changed, the holy day was received with honor. Everything surrounding her arrival declared that a different government had entered the home. This was not the government of human ambition, pharaoh, empire, commerce, or endless production. The Sabbath came bearing the authority of Adonai, placing a boundary around labor and reminding every ruler, master, servant, household, and generation that no human power possessed an unlimited claim over life. The Sabbath commanded release. The servant rested, the stranger rested, the animals rested, the land itself was given rest. In this way, the Sabbath exercised a quiet royal authority by interrupting the demands of the fallen order. Human system said, continue producing. The Sabbath said, cease. Oppression said, your labor belongs to the powerful. The Sabbath declared, life belongs to Adonai. Fear said, there will never be enough. The Sabbath invited the household to trust the provision of the one who created the heavens and the earth. This helps us understand why feminine royal imagery gathered around her. The queen does not enter as a servant of the existing order. Her presence establishes another rhythm, another law, and another center. Yet the Sabbath queen must not be reduced to poetic personification alone. Her image becomes especially significant when placed beside the prophetic daughter of Zion. The daughter receives the former dominion. Torah proceeds from Zion. The king dwells in her midst. The nations come to receive instruction. The land begins to recover beneath the order flowing from the kingdom. These patterns illuminate one another. The Sabbath is welcomed as queen because she bears the characteristics of Malkhut: sacred order, righteous boundaries, nourishment, peace, royal rest, and the presence of Adonai among his people. The queen is not independent from the king. Her authority does not originate in separation from him. She receives and manifests the order of his reign. This is precisely what the prophets reveal concerning Zion. Zephaniah addresses the daughter and declares, the King of Israel, Adonai, is in thy midst. The grammar preserves both distinction and union. The daughter is addressed, the king is within her midst. His presence does not erase her identity, and her royal identity does not replace him. She is not the king, yet neither is she presented as one anonymous subject among many. She is the royal woman within whom his government becomes present and from whom the order of the kingdom proceeds. This allows us to understand the relationship between the king and Malkhut more clearly. The king possesses royal authority. Malkhut is that authority received and manifested within the realm. The king establishes righteous dominion. The queen brings the household beneath its order. The king judges what threatens the inheritance. The queen gathers, nourishes, protects, and prepares the household to dwell beneath his government. These functions are distinct but not opposed. They belong to one divine royal order. The Sabbath Queen therefore reveals more than rest after labor. She reveals the character of the kingdom as a holy dwelling. When the Sabbath enters the household, sacred time surrounds ordinary life. The table becomes a place of peace. Bread and wine testify to provision. Family and stranger are gathered beneath one commandment, and labor loses its power to define the value of a person. The household is reminded that life is more than production and that creation belongs to Adonai. In the same way, the restored Malkhut gathers creation beneath sacred order. The land is tended rather than merely exploited. The nations are instructed rather than merely controlled. The wounded are gathered rather than discarded. The inheritance is protected from endless ambition so that each household may dwell without fear. This is the royal character of Sabbath peace. It does not imitate the governments of the world, but establishes an authority that brings life into harmony with the purpose of the Creator. The Queen also reveals why the kingdom must be more than a political administration. An administration may issue laws while remaining distant from the people. A living kingdom enters the household, orders its rhythm, guards its life, nourishes its members, and makes the presence of the king known within it. The prophetic feminine identity of Zion carries this living dimension. She is city, yet more than architecture. She is sanctuary, yet more than a building. She is mother, because the household is gathered within her. She is bride and queen, because she stands in covenantal union with the king. She is Malkhut, because divine government becomes visible through her appointed royal office. The feminine imagery cannot therefore be dismissed as decorative language. The prophets repeatedly address Zion as a woman because the kingdom's identity is relational, maternal, royal, and living. The king comes to her, the dominion comes to her, the children are gathered to her. Torah proceeds from her. Adonai dwells within her midst. The Sabbath Queen thus becomes a witness to the larger mystery within the kingdom. Divine rest is not only an appointed time, but a holy order that must be received, inhabited, and manifested. Yet her entrance during the age of restoration does not mean that the entire work has already reached completion. The household is being ordered, the nations instructed, the inheritance restored, and the king's government manifested through Malkhut. The queen enters while restoration is still advancing. Her arrival announces that the kingdom has begun to take its appointed form. Her presence gathers and prepares creation beneath the government of the king, carrying it toward the final order in which rebellion, division, and death will no longer remain. This is why the Sabbath Queen belongs at the heart of the Millennium's meaning. She reveals the royal character of the restorative kingdom. Malkhut enters wounded creation to restore order, gather the household, instruct the nations, heal the inheritance, and prepare the earth beneath the government of the king. Yet the 1,000 years are not the final eternal order. Darkness has been restrained, but its permanent destruction still lies ahead. At the conclusion of the restorative reign, Revelation shows a final testing, final judgment, and the destruction of death. Only afterward does New Jerusalem descend in complete victory. We will examine that distinction in a separate investigation through Isaiah 65, Revelation, and the ancient textual witnesses. For now, the central truth is this: the Sabbath reign is the restoration of divine government through Malkhut, with the king dwelling and governing in her midst as creation is prepared for everlasting completion. Now that we have explored the character of the restorative kingdom and the restoration of Malkhut, the next question is where this kingdom belongs within the prophetic timeline. In our next study, we will undertake a documented investigation through the scriptures and the ancient witnesses to examine the movement from restoration to final consummation. Together, we will follow the testimony step by step and allow the prophetic order to reveal itself. Thank you for being here with me. May Adonai bless you, guide you, and fill your heart with wisdom, peace, and discernment. Shalom.
Coming to Your light has come, the Sabbath is rising, the kingdom has begun.